"Do not touch him," the alien doctor shouted, his voice echoing across the emergency ward as every technician froze in place. "If those scans are real, then everything we know about human biology is wrong." 24 hours earlier, Daniel Brooks had been having what he hoped would be the most boring workday of the month. At 34 years old, he had spent nearly a decade repairing damaged life support systems on deep space research stations, and boring days were usually the safest ones. He liked it that way. He liked finishing his shift, grabbing a cheeseburger from the cafeteria, calling his younger sister back home in Montana, and pretending space was just another office with worse coffee. The research station Horizon 9 floated nearly 300 million miles from Earth, jointly operated by human engineers and several allied alien governments. Most days, nobody paid much attention to Daniel. He was simply another contractor in a gray work jacket carrying a toolbox through endless white hallways. "Morning, Brooks," called Melissa Carter, another human technician, as she caught up beside him. "Tell me you remembered real coffee this time." Daniel smiled without looking up from his inspection tablet. "Depends. You planning to trade me those blueberry muffins?" "Absolutely not. Then you get station coffee like everybody else." Their quiet conversation ended when warning lights briefly flickered across the ceiling. Nothing dramatic, just another minor systems fluctuation. Horizon 9 experienced them almost every week. Daniel sighed. "There goes my boring day." Inside Reactor Maintenance Bay 4, several alien engineers were already arguing over diagnostic readings displayed in glowing blue symbols that Daniel still could not read without translation software. Standing among them was Chief Medical Officer Dr. Kayles, a respected physician from the Illyrian Commonwealth. Nearly 7 feet tall with pale luminescent skin and calm silver eyes, Kayles rarely entered engineering spaces unless someone had already been injured. "Please tell me nobody ignored the coolant pressure alerts," Daniel muttered. One embarrassed engineer avoided eye contact. That answer told him everything. Before anyone could explain further, a sharp metallic crack echoed through the chamber. A pressure seal ruptured inside one of the auxiliary coolant lines. Emergency barriers deployed instantly, but Daniel had already moved. Years of rescue work had trained his body to react before his mind finished thinking. He shoved one younger technician backward just as a maintenance platform lurched sideways. The impact threw Daniel across the floor, where his shoulder slammed hard against reinforced structural plating before everything became strangely quiet. He remained awake, blinking at the bright ceiling lights. "Daniel," Melissa shouted, dropping beside him. "Hey, stay with me." "I am," he answered with a weak grin. "Think I just lost an argument with the floor." Dr. Kayles knelt beside him, placing a scanner over Daniel's chest. The physician's expression changed almost immediately. "His internal readings make no sense," Kayles whispered. "Transport him now." Daniel wanted to joke that he was fine, that Americans hated hospital bills even in another solar system, but exhaustion settled over him like a heavy blanket. As the medical team rushed him through the station, he caught one final glimpse of Dr. Kayles staring silently at the scanner in his hands, not with fear for his patient, but with the unmistakable expression of someone who had just discovered something that should not have existed. Daniel woke to the soft hum of medical equipment and the unfamiliar scent of antiseptic mixed with something faintly metallic. The ceiling above him shimmered with pale blue light instead of fluorescent panels, and for one confused second, he wondered if he was still dreaming. Then the ache in his shoulder reminded him exactly where he was. He turned his head slowly and found Melissa sitting beside the bed with a paper cup in her hands. She smiled the moment she saw his eyes open. "You finally decided to join us." Daniel let out a tired laugh. "How long was I out?" "Almost 11 hours. That is going to ruin my sleep schedule." She rolled her eyes. "You almost got crushed by a maintenance platform, and that is your biggest concern? You have never tried fixing reactors while exhausted." Before Melissa could answer, the sliding door opened. Dr. Kayles entered carrying a transparent medical tablet covered in shifting symbols. His calm expression remained professional, but Daniel noticed something different. The doctor was studying him the way an astronomer might study a newly discovered star. "Good morning, Mr. Brooks," Kayles said through the universal translator. "How are you feeling?" Daniel flexed his fingers, then carefully rotated his shoulder. "Sore? Hungry? Slightly embarrassed." "Embarrassed. I usually try not to make such an expensive entrance." Melissa laughed quietly while Kayles only nodded, almost distracted. Your injuries appear considerably less severe than our initial assessment predicted. Lucky me. Kaylee's hesitated before speaking again. I would like permission to perform additional examinations. Daniel shrugged. As long as nobody sticks anything the size of a garden hose into me. Nothing so unpleasant. A few minutes later, Daniel found himself inside a diagnostic chamber, surrounded by silent scanners that floated through the air with impossible precision. Soft beams of light swept across his body while medical displays filled with rapidly changing information. Kaylee's remained unusually quiet. Another physician entered, glanced at one screen, frowned, and immediately recalibrated the equipment. The scan restarted. Then it happened again. A third machine was wheeled into the room. Melissa leaned toward Daniel and whispered, "Either you are the healthiest guy in the galaxy, or somebody forgot how to use the machines." Daniel whispered back, "I am hoping for option 2. The room stayed silent except for the gentle hum of electronics. Finally, one younger technician looked toward Kaylee's. "Doctor, every system is reporting the same structural composition." Kaylee's folded his arms. "Run an independent verification." "Already completed." "Use another scanner." "Completed." Kaylee slowly approached the largest display. Daniel could not understand the alien symbols until the translator automatically converted one line into English. Skeletal composition, calcium dominant. Estimated density, outside galactic biological standards. The doctor stared at the words without blinking. "Impossible," another physician murmured. "No advanced vertebrate species could evolve with a mineral framework this rigid." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "I hate to interrupt the science conference, but is something wrong with my bones?" Kaylee's looked directly at him. "Mr. Brooks, according to every accepted medical model in known space, your species should not function." Daniel blinked once before answering with complete sincerity. "Well, my mother always said I was hard-headed." Nobody laughed. That worried him more than the strange machines. Kaylee's quietly dismissed every technician except his senior staff. Once the room emptied, he lowered his voice. "Until we understand these results, this conversation does not leave this medical wing." Outside the sealed laboratory doors, unnoticed by everyone inside, a security officer quietly transmitted a priority report marked with a single sentence. "Human biological anomaly confirmed." Daniel expected more tests the next morning. He did not expect the entire medical wing to become strangely quiet every time he walked through it. Conversations stopped. Screens were tilted away from him. Even the nurses who had joked with him the night before suddenly became careful with every word they spoke. He caught Melissa watching the hallway through the small window in his room. "Something feels off," she admitted. "You noticed too?" Daniel asked. "Everybody is acting like you are carrying some classified secret instead of a bruised shoulder." Before either of them could say another word, Dr. Kaylee stepped inside, holding an old-fashioned paper folder along with his digital tablet. Daniel smiled. "Paper now? I thought humans were the only weird ones who still like that." Kaylee's glanced at the folder for a moment. "Sometimes physical records cannot be altered remotely. I find them reassuring." Daniel nodded. "Fair enough." The doctor placed several scan images across the table. "I need your help understanding something. These images belong to you. Every scanner we possess has produced identical results." Daniel leaned closer. He recognized outlines of his skeleton, but several sections had been highlighted in bright gold. "Looks like I won some kind of science fair." Kaylee's ignored the joke. Every known intelligent species evolved skeletal structures using flexible crystalline compounds or reinforced biological fibers. Your skeleton is built primarily from calcium compounds. That sounds normal. It is not normal. Kaylee's looked directly into Daniel's eyes. "Not here." Daniel shrugged. "Back home we drink milk because our parents tell us it is good for our bones." The room became completely silent. One young alien researcher slowly looked up from her notes. "Your children consume additional calcium voluntarily?" Daniel laughed. "When they can be convinced." None of the researchers joined him. Instead, they hurriedly entered new information into their records. Kaylee's pressed his fingers against the bridge of his nose. "Our medical databases classify calcium structures as evolutionarily unstable beyond small organisms. They should fracture under repeated stress." Daniel stretched both arms over his head before rotating his shoulder carefully. "Construction work kind of disproves that theory." Another physician stepped forward carrying laboratory results. "Doctor, we completed the material resistance simulation." Kaylee's accepted the report. His expression changed again. "Repeat the simulation." "We already repeated it 5 times." "Then repeat it 6. Daniel frowned. "Would somebody please explain why everyone suddenly looks nervous?" Kaylee's hesitated longer than before. "Your skeletal density exceeds projections by an average of 38% compared to what our models consider biologically sustainable. Combined with your muscular attachment patterns, your body distributes physical force in ways we have never documented." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "Honestly, I just thought I had good genetics." Melissa folded her arms. "His father worked construction for 40 years. His grandfather ran a cattle ranch. Nobody in that family ever stayed still." Kaylee's looked between them. "Your people perform physically demanding labor for multiple generations." "Welcome to America," Daniel answered with a small smile. "Some families never really stop building things." Before Kaylee's could respond, every light in the examination room briefly dimmed. A station-wide announcement echoed through the corridor requesting all senior medical personnel report immediately to Conference Room 7. The doctor's tablet vibrated almost instantly. He glanced at the message, and for the first time since meeting Daniel, genuine concern crossed his face. Someone beyond the hospital had read the report, and they were no longer asking whether the scans were accurate. They were asking how quickly the human could be transferred into government custody. Dr. Kaylee's returned less than 20 minutes later, but he no longer looked like the calm physician Daniel had met 2 days earlier. 2 security officers followed several steps behind him without saying a word. They did not wear hospital uniforms. Their dark gray armor carried the insignia of the Interstellar Science Authority. Daniel immediately noticed the difference. "I thought this was a hospital," he said quietly. "Since when do doctors travel with an escort?" Kaylee's dismissed the officers with a brief gesture before closing the room door. "Since my patient became the subject of government interest." Daniel looked at Melissa. "I knew this was going to be more expensive than my insurance deductible." Melissa forced a smile, but her eyes remained fixed on the hallway outside. "Daniel, I do not think this is about medical bills anymore." Kaylee's placed a sealed tablet on the table. "Several agencies have requested immediate custody of you." Daniel blinked. "Custody? I fixed air filters for a living." "Officially, they wish to study an unexpected biological discovery." "Unofficially," Kaylee's hesitated. "They are afraid of what they do not understand." Daniel leaned back against the bed. "That makes 2 of us." Before another word could be spoken, an announcement echoed through the medical wing. "Diagnostic transfer team arriving in Corridor 3. Kaylee's frowned. "They are early." "Who is early?" Daniel asked. "The people I was hoping would arrive tomorrow." Kaylee stepped toward the door, then turned back. "Remain here. Do not leave this room for any reason." Melissa folded her arms. "That sounds exactly like the beginning of every bad day in history." The doctor disappeared into the hallway. Through the small observation window, Daniel could see several officials entering the medical wing, carrying portable scanners and secure storage cases. They looked more interested in equipment than patients. Curious voices drifted through the partially open doorway. "Verify the skeletal readings. Confirm tissue density. Prepare transport authorization." Daniel sighed. "I have never felt less like a person in my life." Melissa sat beside him. "You are still a person." Apparently, everybody else missed that memo. A few minutes later, a young maintenance robot rolled into the room carrying replacement monitoring equipment. It paused near Daniel's bed while its optical sensors flashed amber. Melissa glanced at the display. "That does not look normal." The robot emitted a short electronic tone before attempting to recalibrate one of the diagnostic units beside the bed. Suddenly, every screen in the room flickered. Warning symbols flashed across the monitors as the machine interpreted conflicting medical data. Its safety routines entered a continuous reset loop, causing one of its automated calibration devices to activate unexpectedly. A compact, high-velocity industrial test cartridge discharged toward the reinforced diagnostic barrier directly beside Daniel's bed. The room echoed with a sharp metallic crack. The cartridge struck the barrier, ricocheted at an angle, and clipped Daniel across the upper shoulder before embedding itself harmlessly into a thick support column behind him. Melissa gasped and rushed toward him. "Daniel." He looked down in surprise. His hospital gown showed a small tear, but beneath it there was only a faint reddish mark that already seemed to be fading. "Well," he said after a long pause, "that definitely woke me up." Medical staff rushed into the room almost instantly. One technician examined the damage barrier while another stared at Daniel's shoulder without speaking. Dr. Cayley's pushed through the crowd, his breathing unusually fast. He looked from the embedded test cartridge to Daniel, then slowly reached out and touched the unbroken skin where every calculation had predicted catastrophic injury. No one spoke. Even the security officers stood frozen. For the first time, the silence inside the medical wing was heavier than the sound that had caused it. Dr. Cayley's stood motionless for several long seconds before finally speaking. "Seal this room immediately. Nobody enters without my authorization." The medical staff obeyed without question. One technician carefully removed the industrial test cartridge from the support column and placed it inside a containment case, as though it were suddenly dangerous evidence. Daniel looked from one nervous face to another. "Can somebody explain why everyone looks like they just watched a ghost walk through the wall?" Cayley slowly exhaled. "That cartridge is designed to test reinforced structural materials used inside research stations. It should never have struck a patient, but even after the ricochet, every prediction suggested extensive skeletal damage." Daniel gently rolled his shoulder again. The soreness from the maintenance accident was actually worse than the fresh bruise. "Well, I guess your prediction software needs an update." Nobody laughed. Instead, Cayley's picked up his scanner and performed another complete examination. The readings only deepened the mystery. Not only had Daniel avoided serious injury, but microscopic imaging revealed something even stranger. His bones had flexed slightly under the impact before returning to their original structure without measurable damage. Cayley's quietly replayed the scans several times. "This cannot be correct." One of the senior researchers spoke carefully. "Doctor, perhaps the scanner is compensating incorrectly because of the calcium matrix." Cayley shook his head. "No, the scanner is functioning perfectly." He turned toward Daniel. "Tell me about your childhood." Daniel blinked. "That is quite a change of subject." "Please." Daniel shrugged. "Pretty ordinary. Grew up outside Billings, Montana. Rode bicycles. Climbed trees. Played football until my mother decided broken windows were getting too expensive. Helped my dad remodel houses every summer. Nothing exciting." "Did you experience repeated physical strain while growing?" "I suppose so. My father believed weekends existed for fixing fences." Several alien researchers exchanged confused looks. One quietly asked, "Children repaired agricultural structures?" Daniel smiled. "Sometimes willingly. Usually because our parents asked." Cayley stared at the medical display. "Your civilization develops its young under continuous environmental stress. We call it growing up." The doctor walked toward the observation window overlooking the station. Ships drifted silently beyond the glass while sunlight from a distant star reflected across the hulls. "Our worlds are different," he said almost to himself. "Most advanced species eliminated hardship generations before reaching interstellar travel. We engineered comfort. We removed unnecessary risks from childhood, labor, and daily life." Daniel stepped beside him. "There is nothing wrong with making life easier." "Perhaps not," Cayley's answered quietly. "But evolution never stopped asking your species difficult questions." That sentence lingered in the room. Even Melissa remained silent. For the first time, Daniel realized this was no longer about one unusual medical report. The doctor was beginning to question assumptions accepted across the entire galaxy. Before anyone could continue, the secure communication terminal chimed. Cayley's accepted the transmission. A dignified alien administrator appeared on the screen wearing the insignia of the Galactic Medical Council. "Dr. Cayley's," the official said calmly, "your preliminary findings have been reviewed. Effective immediately, all research concerning the human subject falls under council oversight." Cayley's remained perfectly still. "He is my patient. He is now considered a matter of scientific importance." The transmission ended without waiting for a reply. Daniel looked toward the dark screen and quietly said, "Funny. Yesterday, I was just the guy fixing the air filters. Today, everybody suddenly owns an opinion about my skeleton." Cayley's lowered the communicator and met Daniel's eyes. "No, Mr. Brooks. They do not care about your skeleton." His voice grew noticeably quieter. "They care about what your species may have become because of it." The following morning, Horizon 9 no longer felt like a research station. It felt like a government building pretending to be a hospital. Uniformed security officers stood outside every intersection. New surveillance drones floated silently through the corridors. Even the cafeteria had been closed without explanation. Daniel watched everything through the small window of his room before shaking his head. This is getting ridiculous. Melissa looked up from her chair. I tried asking one of the guards where they suddenly came from. What did he say? He said he was not authorized to discuss security operations. Daniel laughed softly. That usually means nobody knows what is going on. A quiet knock interrupted them. Dr. Kaylees entered carrying 2 coffee cups, one prepared with a human nutritional profile. He handed it to Daniel without saying a word. Daniel accepted it with an appreciative smile. You remembered. Your records indicated that coffee improves your emotional stability. Daniel took one sip. Doctor, I hate to disappoint your scientific community, but coffee improves everybody's emotional stability. For the first time in days, Kaylee smiled. It disappeared almost immediately. I have spoken with the council representatives. Let me guess, Daniel replied. They want more tests. Much more than that. Kaylee's activated the privacy field surrounding the room. The faint shimmer across the walls muffled every outside sound. They wish to relocate you to a classified research installation. Daniel stared at him for several seconds. No, Kaylee seemed surprised. You have not heard their proposal. I do not need to. I came here to repair environmental systems, not become somebody's science project. Melissa nodded firmly. He has a job. He has family. People cannot simply disappear because somebody finds them interesting. Kaylees lowered his eyes. I argued the same point. And the council believes the discovery outweighs individual preference. Daniel stood and slowly walked toward the observation window. Cargo ships drifted peacefully beyond the station, while Earth appeared as nothing more than a distant blue point on the navigation display. Back home, he said quietly, my dad always told me something. If people stop seeing the person and only see what you can do for them, it is time to walk away. Kaylees joined him at the window. Your father was wise. Mostly stubborn. Sometimes there is little difference. Before the conversation could continue, the privacy field flickered. An incoming transmission forced its way through the encrypted barrier. A tall alien official appeared on the display, dressed in the formal robes of the Galactic Scientific Directorate. Dr. Kaylees, transport vessel Aurora has arrived. The human subject will be transferred within 1 hour. Daniel folded his arms. You keep calling me the human subject like I am standing somewhere else. The official barely acknowledged him. Resistance is unnecessary. This relocation serves the interests of all civilized species. Daniel answered calmly. Funny. Nobody asked what serves mine. The transmission ended as abruptly as it had begun. Silence settled over the room again. Kaylees remained motionless before finally speaking. There is another option. Daniel looked at him. I am listening. Medical law still grants the attending physician authority to determine whether a patient is stable enough for transport. Melissa's eyes widened. You are thinking about delaying them. Kaylees slowly nodded. Not delaying. He looked directly at Daniel with complete seriousness. Protecting my patient until I know whether the galaxy deserves to study him or whether it merely wishes to possess him. Dr. Kaylees filed the medical delay exactly 43 minutes before the transport team arrived. Under galactic medical law, the attending physician could postpone any transfer if new clinical findings suggested additional evaluation was necessary. It was an old law, written to protect patients, not discoveries. Daniel watched the confirmation appear across the monitor. So now what? He asked. Kaylees folded his hands behind his back. Now we discover how much the council respects its own laws. They did not wait long. Less than 15 minutes later, 3 officials from the Galactic Scientific Directorate entered the medical wing accompanied by station security. Their leader introduced herself simply as Director Sorrel, a composed woman whose polished tone sounded more like an attorney than a scientist. Dr. Kaylees, she said, your transfer delay has been reviewed. Excellent, Kaylees replied. Then you understand my patient is not medically cleared. We understand that your assessment differs from ours. Daniel quietly stepped beside Melissa. That does not sound promising. Melissa whispered back. People usually start using that voice when they think they are already right. Director Sorrel looked directly at Daniel for the first time. Mr. Brooks, your cooperation would benefit every civilization represented within the council. Daniel answered calmly. I cooperate every day. I fix environmental systems that keep thousands of people breathing. That is my job. Your responsibilities have changed. I do not remember applying for a new one. The room fell silent. Kaylee's broke the tension before anyone else could respond. If the directorate believes my conclusions are inaccurate, then let us settle this scientifically. Sorrel narrowed her eyes. Explain. Allow independent verification conducted under standard medical ethics with the patient fully informed and consenting. Daniel immediately nodded. That part sounds reasonable. Sorrel hesitated before giving a small nod of approval. Very well. Within the hour, a multidisciplinary research team assembled inside the diagnostic laboratory. Engineers, physicians, materials specialists, and biological physicists filled the observation deck. Nobody carried weapons. Nobody raised their voice. They simply wanted answers. Daniel stood inside a transparent testing chamber, wearing ordinary station clothing instead of a hospital gown. This feels like the strangest physical exam I have ever had, he joked. Kaylee's adjusted several monitoring displays. Nothing performed today should cause you harm. We are measuring how your body responds to controlled environmental conditions already considered safe by station regulations. Good, Daniel replied. I left my superhero cape at home. The first evaluation increased artificial gravity in small increments. Daniel shifted his footing slightly before looking through the glass. Feels like carrying groceries upstairs. Confused murmurs spread through the observation room. The second evaluation exposed him to rapid temperature changes well within certified occupational limits. Daniel shrugged. Montana winters prepared me for worse than this. Several researchers exchanged puzzled looks. A materials scientist quietly asked, "Your home world experiences conditions like these naturally?" Melissa smiled proudly. Depending on the season, sometimes before breakfast. Hours passed as every result challenged another accepted scientific assumption. Muscular recovery, joint flexibility, bone compression, oxygen efficiency. Nothing behaved the way the models predicted. Finally, Kaylee's projected every dataset onto the central display. The room became completely still. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said softly, "we have not discovered an impossible man." He looked toward Daniel with unmistakable respect. "We have discovered that our understanding of humanity has been incomplete from the very beginning." No one argued with him. Even Director Sorrel remained silent, staring at the evidence before her, realizing that the greatest revelation was not how extraordinary one human appeared to be, but how little the galaxy truly understood the billions waiting back on Earth. The findings from Horizon 9 spread through the scientific community faster than anyone expected. Within 12 hours, encrypted reports had reached medical academies, defense ministries, and university laboratories across Council space. Every message carried the same conclusion. Existing biological models could not explain the human body. Daniel did not know any of that until Dr. Kaylee's walked into his room, carrying a small stack of printed requests. "You have visitors," the doctor said. Daniel looked up from the old paperback novel Melissa had found somewhere on the station. "Please tell me they are not more scientists." "Actually," Kaylee's replied, "they are diplomats." Daniel sighed. Somehow that sounds even worse. Minutes later, 3 representatives entered the room without security escorts. One wore the formal insignia of the Galactic Medical Council. Another represented the Interstellar Labor Alliance. The third introduced herself as Ambassador Elena Foster from the United Nations mission on Earth. Daniel stood immediately. Finally, somebody from home. Elena smiled warmly before shaking his hand. "Your sister has called our office 6 times in the last 24 hours. Daniel laughed for the first time in days. "That sounds like Rachel. She threatened to charter a civilian shuttle if nobody told her where you were." Melissa grinned. "That definitely sounds like family." After a few lighter moments, the atmosphere became serious again. Ambassador Foster placed a sealed folder on the table. "Daniel, every government represented here has reviewed Dr. Kaylee's findings. They all have one question." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "Which is, how common are your biological characteristics?" Daniel looked genuinely confused. "Common? Yes." He looked around the room before answering. "I am not special. I grew up with kids who wrestled on farms after school. My uncle is almost 70 and still cuts firewood every winter because he says it keeps him busy. My cousin runs marathons for fun, which I personally think is insane. Several alien delegates quietly exchanged glances. Daniel continued. Construction workers, firefighters, mechanics, ranchers, nurses, soldiers, teachers. You are acting like I won some genetic lottery. I am just average. Nobody interrupted him. Dr. Cayley slowly opened one of the earlier scan reports and looked at Daniel with a completely different expression than he had worn only days before. Average, he repeated quietly. Yes. Then our greatest misunderstanding was never about one man. Daniel nodded. You built your medical books without ever understanding where humans came from. He walked toward the observation window, where distant stars filled the darkness beyond the station. Earth is beautiful, but it has never been easy. Storms, mountains, deserts, freezing winters, blazing summers. We spent thousands of years solving problems because nobody else was coming to solve them for us. Ambassador Foster smiled proudly. That is probably the most accurate description of humanity I have heard in years. Dr. Cayley's closed the report and looked around the room. We believe humanity survived despite its harsh home world. He paused before continuing. The evidence now suggests humanity became what it is because of that world. No one argued. For the first time since Daniel arrived at Horizon 9, every person in the room understood that the real discovery had never been calcium, bone density, or physical resilience. It was the realization that Earth's ordinary people had been shaped by an extraordinary world, and the galaxy had mistaken that quiet resilience for fragility all along. 3 weeks later, Daniel Brooks walked through the departure terminal of Horizon 9, carrying the same weathered toolbox he had arrived with months before. Nothing about him looked remarkable. His shoulder had healed. His work boots still carried scratches from maintenance decks. His jacket still smelled faintly of machine oil and coffee. To everyone passing by, he looked like another contractor heading home after a long assignment. Only the people standing at Gate 12 understood that history had quietly changed around him. Dr. Cayley's waited beside the boarding ramp, holding a small bound journal instead of a medical tablet. Daniel smiled as he approached. No scanners today? Cayley's returned the smile. Today I wish to speak to my friend, not my patient. Daniel accepted the journal and looked at the simple cover. You wrote a book? Only the beginning of one. Daniel opened the first page. At the top, written in careful handwriting, were the words, "Humanity was never medically impossible. Our assumptions were simply too small." Daniel looked up without speaking. Cayley's continued quietly. Every medical academy within the council has suspended its human biology curriculum. We are rewriting everything. Melissa laughed softly. That is a lot of homework. It is necessary, Cayley's answered. Science does not lose when it discovers it was wrong. It grows. Ambassador Elena Foster stepped forward carrying a small envelope. Your return clearance, she said. And your supervisor wanted me to tell you something. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Please tell me I still have a job. He said if you are finished terrifying the galaxy, there are still air filtration systems waiting to be repaired. Daniel laughed so hard that several nearby travelers turned to look. Now that sounds like home. Boarding was announced a few minutes later. Daniel picked up his toolbox before turning back toward Cayley's. Can I ask you something? Of course. After everything that happened, what surprised you the most? The doctor looked through the wide observation window toward the blue planet that shimmered far beyond the station. Not your bones, he answered. Not your strength. Not even your ability to survive. He paused before continuing. It was discovering that you believed all of it was ordinary. Daniel shrugged with the quiet honesty that had carried him through every conversation since the accident. Where I come from, every family has stories about getting back up after life knocks them down. We never thought that made us special. We just thought that was life. Cayley's nodded slowly. Perhaps that is exactly what makes humanity extraordinary. The boarding signal sounded again. Daniel extended his hand one last time. Cayley's ignored it and pulled him into an awkward but genuine embrace that made several nearby observers smile. Travel safely, my friend. You too, Doctor. As the shuttle lifted away from Horizon 9, Cayley's remained at the window watching the engines disappear into the darkness between the stars. Later that evening, he submitted the final sentence of his report to the Galactic Medical Council. It did not describe calcium, bone density, or evolutionary theory. Instead, it simply read, "We spent decades asking why humans survived impossible worlds. We should have asked what impossible worlds created humans." Years later, medical students across the galaxy would memorize those words on the first day of class, while Daniel Brooks quietly returned to fixing broken machines on Earth, never considering himself a hero, because the strongest people are often the ones who never realize how much hope they give to everyone else simply by refusing to stop being themselves.